Good evening. Tonight, 72 more people have tested positive for COVID-19. 2 days since the 7th presidential address in which President Uhuru Kenyatta hinted at reopening the economy and the country. Is it too late to open? Good evening. I'm Abubakar Abdullahi. Thank you for making time for us. A little bit later, we'll be speaking to the government spokesperson. But first, these are the stories making headlines tonight. 72 more people test positive for coronavirus, with Turkana County becoming the latest devolved unit to record a case as the virus continues its march across the country. Plus, hopes of reopening the country grows even as fear of the virus spiraling out of control becomes rife. Which way, Kenya? And tonight we tell the plight of Kariobangi land evictees who have had to beg the same government that stripped down their dwellings. Good evening and welcome to the broadcast. Our top story now, as coronavirus continues to spread in different counties, Turkana County is the latest to report its first COVID-19 case. This even as the country recorded another 72 new COVID cases in the last 24 hours. Chief Administrative Secretary in the Ministry of Health, Mercy Mwangangi, has called upon Kenyans to maintain a healthy diet as a measure of keeping the virus at bay. Zablon Masharia begins our broadcast tonight.
Even as the government is trying hard to curb the spread of COVID-19, Health CAS Dr. Mercy Mwangangi has reported 72 cases of the virus confirmed in the last 24 hours. According to Dr. Mwangangi, Kenyans should adhere to the set guidelines even as the country is returning to its normalcy. She insisted of maintaining a healthy diet.
Because it strengthens our body's immune system to be able to fight diseases. And it's important to note specifically for individuals who may have underlying conditions or who may have issues such as malnourishment are at greater risk of various infections, including this of COVID-19.
Out of the 72 cases reported, Nairobi has the highest with 52 cases, Mombasa has 11 cases, Kiambu reported 7 cases, while Turkana and Isiolo had 1 case each.
Langata has 21 cases, Dagoretti North 15, Kamukunji and Kibra 4 cases each, Embakasi East 2, Kasarani 3, Dagoretti South 1, Makadara and Mathare 1 case each.
Director General in the Ministry of Health, Dr. Patrick Amoth, has decried Kenyans' behavior of not giving out correct personal details, hindering the ministry's effort of tracing individuals who test positive.
However, some Kenyans have become crafty and they give us false information in terms of their mobile numbers. So we test, the test comes out positive, but when you call, then it's a different person. Then that makes it very, very difficult for us.
Elsewhere, following the continuous wrangles at borders of Tanzania and Uganda, Dr. Amoth says ministers of EAC will hold a discussion to end the stalemate.
Because we have not come up with a cohesive plan as an EAC, as the East African community. You find that one country has been able to put this particular measure in place. That is what is leading to our problems. But even today, there's a team of PSS who are at Malaba to be able to address these issues. And
CAS Mercy Mwangangi has also decried the decline in number of people seeking medical care in hospitals since the advent of COVID-19 pandemic. Mwangangi has called upon Kenyans not to fear since the doctors and nurses are adequately prepared to stop the virus. Zablon Masharia, TV47, Nairobi.
Elsewhere, the debate on whether to reopen schools or not has gained momentum and continues to gain momentum in the country, with different stakeholders in the education sector seemingly differing. Andrin Kilemi tells us why.
The golden unanswered question which lingers in every Kenyan mind is whether it is the right time for schools to reopen. This, even as Kenyans wait to hear from the Education Response Committee, which was mandated with the planning and reorganizing of the school calendar. different stakeholders in the education sector have differed. Deputy Chairman Kupet Kakamega branch says it is about time that pupils and students went back to class, as most girls are at a risk of falling pregnant at an early age.
Watoto wetu wasichana wa standard 8 au wasichana wetu wa form 4, tukisema tukae mpaka next year, unaona vile watu wa bodaboda wanawasumbua. Tutakuwa na familia ama tutakuwa tuko na wanafunzi.
On the other hand, Kupet Chairman Trans Nzoia County says that school is of less importance as compared to good health.
Let's not make exams to be so important compared to life. Because without this life, we will not be there to teach, will not be there to learn.
It is a statement that was supported by NAT Secretary in Bungoma East, who has also warned against reopening of schools for fear that this would increase the rate at which COVID-19 is spreading in the country.
Watoto wetu kama hii ugonjwa bado inaendelea namna hivi, we must not allow our children to go to school.
Here in Nairobi, the few parents we spoke to said keeping students at home for long is a waste of time when they could be in school learning and adhering to the guidelines by the Ministry of Health.
Zifunguriwe. Cause hata saa hii watoto bado wanarandarada kwa barabara na hata hawavai mask.
Sifunguliwe, lakini wafugue na awamu. Kwa mfano, hawa watoto wakubwa ni tofauti sana na hawa wadogo. Tuseme kama mtu ako class 8, sio the same na mwenye ako nursery ama PP1 hivyo. Kwa hivyo wageanza na hawa wakubwa.
And if schools were to reopen today amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, what would this mean to the education sector?
Kurudi shuleni, naona kwamba kutahitajika kuwe na mikakati ya kutosha, hasa katika zile sheria za kutunza hali ya afya. Kwa mfano ile hali ya kuweka nafasi ya mita 1 ama mita 2, kule kunawa, kule kutangamana itakuwa ni shida pia katika kupata nafasi ya kutosha, kwa sababu shule nyingi zina matatizo kwa mfano ya maji. Kwa hivyo itabidi kuwe na mpango wa kuwa na maji ya kutosha katika kila shule na kuwe na vifaa vya kuwezesha wanafunzi wanapoingia labda waweze kupimwa kwenye kabla wajaingia shuleni.
And even as education stakeholders continue to differ, all eyes are now on the 9-member education committee to chart a way forward in the reopening of schools. Andrin Kilemi for TV 47.
Elsewhere, the global community is racing to slow down and eventually halt the spread of COVID-19. In Africa, governments and health authorities across the continent are not only striving to limit widespread infections, but also looking for possible ways of revamping their economies and getting things back to normalcy. Linda Alela reports.
World Health Organization warned nations to lift lockdowns gradually while still being on the lookout for COVID-19 and ready to restore restrictions if the virus jumps back. Many countries have already been pushed to the knees, forcing them to reopen their already dwindling economies. Push has come to shove in Kenya, for instance. President Uhuru Kenyatta on Saturday hinted at a possibility of reopening the economy.
Waanze kuambia Wakenya, waanze kuwaeleza Wakenya ya kwamba hatuwezi kuendelea na lockdown, hatuwezi kuendelea maisha na curfew.
The 53.7 billion shillings economic stimulus package was a clear indication that the president was focused on reopening the economy. Key sectors like education, health, infrastructure, agriculture, tourism and SMEs getting jump-start packs to bounce back. But just what could have informed the president's decision? Were the measures taken in the country necessary in the first place? Amid major scares across the world, as late February 2020, Africa was still free from the deadly novel coronavirus, and this led to the spread of a misleading narrative that Africans, due to their genetic composition and skin color, can resist COVID-19. Today, though, Africa has reported approximately 100,000 COVID-19 cases so far, demystifying the narrative, though the numbers taking a slower rate of increase than in many European nations. The low numbers show a possibility of Africa being hit less severely, though it remains unclear. This then could mean that Africa shouldn't have aped the policies of Western countries in dealing with the virus. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair says that rates of testing coronavirus in Africa are too low to know how the disease is spreading or what its fatality rate will be. He proposes antibody tests for African nations, which he says are accurate and affordable enough to sample the population and, like an opinion poll, show what percentage of the population is likely to be affected.
We start to get some knowledge of, is it that the disease has spread but people are resilient and asymptomatic, which actually I think a lot of African cases are asymptomatic, or is it that actually it hasn't spread? And this would be very important information.
Blair says if implemented and is effective, the information will be handy for leaders to chart the way forward for their countries. Nations continue to research better ways of testing and a possible vaccine. Kemri Wellcome Trust in Kilifi has developed an immunological assay, a tool that detects virus footprints on patients to track the number of people who have been exposed to COVID-19. Senegal, too, is working on producing a cheap antibody test kit.
The antibody test, yes, very critical for seroprevalence at community level. However, as of now, our gold standard is the real-time PCR as recommended by WHO. But because Kemri Wellcome Trust is a research institution, it would be good for them to go ahead with the development of this antibody test.
So if you had an antigen test, which you can take a blood sample from individuals and screen, you could tell pretty quickly how many individuals have seen SARS-CoV-2 infection. So that's what we are looking to do in terms of developing an antibody test to do a quick screen of the population rather than the current method.
There are a wide variety of tests with varying degrees of accuracy. Most African nations, though, are focused on PCR tests to identify people who might be spreading the disease and not those who have had it. Speculations have it that the disease may have spread and people have since become resilient and asymptomatic. For many leaders in Africa today, the virus is fast becoming the least of their worries, reviving their damaged economies, aggravating hunger and slowing the fight against other deadly diseases is top of their agenda. Linda Alela, TV 47.
Well, tonight, 72 more people have tested positive for COVID-19, 2 days since President Uhuru Kenyatta, in his 7th address to the nation since the outbreak of COVID-19, hinted at reopening the economy. Tonight, the question we are asking you is it too early to think of reopening? We speak to the government spokesperson, Cyrus Oguna, who joins us now live. Cyrus, thank you for making time for us this evening. In his 7th national address since the outbreak of COVID-19, President Uhuru Kenyatta said, and I quote, "I have told my cabinet secretaries that we cannot stay in lockdown forever. But if we open up the country by lifting restrictions and the virus continues to spread, it will be our fault for not taking the precautionary and precautions outlined." Why harbor an intention of wanting to reopen at a day in which we have 70 plus cases being reported? Is it too early to?
You are breaking up, Abubakar. You're breaking. I can't hear you well.
All right, Colonel, can you hear me now?
You're breaking so badly.
Can you hear me now, Colonel?
I can hear you, yes, but you're not clear at all.
All right, let me ask you, given that President Uhuru Kenyatta in his 7th address to the nation hinted at reopening the country, in a day in which we have 70 plus cases being reported, why would the government harbor intentions of reopening the country?
I'm sorry, I really hear you. I can't really pick out the question. I can hear some noise or some kind of, voice, but in terms of clarity, it's very, very poor.
All right, Colonel, let's sort that glitch for a moment, but it's time for us to take a short break here on New Week. We'll be back with this discussion and much more news after this break. Welcome back to New Week. Thank you for choosing to stay with us. Moving on, heavy rains continue to wreak havoc across the country, rendering thousands of people homeless. This comes and is happening as the government continues to advise people in flood-prone areas to move to safer grounds. Eli Logova reports.
At least 29 counties in the country continue to experience heavy rains that have caused flash floods, destruction, and death. In Tana River County, 15 wards have so far been affected, rendering more than 48,000 people homeless. They now call upon the government to intervene and also deliver humanitarian aid.
Mtu hawezi ukapita. Saa hii mto tayari, hivi saa hii tunakuja tayari, tumeita wale divers ndio wakaisafisha mto ndio tukapita. Hata boti yenyewe shida kuokoa watu. Hawa watu si hadi kupenda kwao kukaa hapa. Wamekonza means ya kwenda nyanja za juu. Lakini saa hii wakipata means wako tayari kwenda hizo mara kama hizo. Lakini saa hii hawapati means yote ya kwenda pale juu. Ndiposa wame stranded hapa na saa hii hata kwa boti huwezi kubeba maana yake mto si safi. Mto saa hii imeziba. Kwa hivyo tuwezi tukabeba. Kwa hivyo sisi tunawaambia serikali. Iko serikali ya aina mbili, serikali ya county government na serikali national government. Hawa watu wote ni katika wale serikali, hizi serikali mbili. Lakini ajabu iliyoko, kuanzia mpaka saa hii hakuna intervention yote serikali imekuja kufanya ama kuja kuulizia ama kuja kujua tathmini ama monitoring kwamba ni watu wangapi wameathirika.
Roads have been damaged, making it difficult for humanitarian aid workers and well-wishers to access the affected people.
Nasaidia community pande ya udereva wa boti, lakini kulingana na hii flood ya mara hii kuna changamoto sana. Kwa sababu pahali ya kukimbia pengine 45 minutes unachukua karibu masaa mawili, saa moja na nusu kwa sababu kuna manyasi yameziba kwa mto na magogo. Sasa angalia kama hapa kwa saa hii tumemaliza kama saa moja na nusu na ni pahali ambayo ya kupita hata dakika 5 ni nyingi, lakini saa hii tumemaliza kama saa moja na nusu hivi kwa kusukumana boti na kuteremka, na ndani ya maji kuna ngwena, kuna viboko. Sasa ni riziki tunafanya.
Western Kenya, Rift Valley and some parts in the coastal region have also been highly affected as the weatherman predicts more rainy days ahead. So far, more than 250 people have lost their lives and more than 800,000 have been affected. The heavy rains have been attributed to climate change. Eli Logova, TV47, Nairobi.
Elsewhere, a reshuffle is looming in the cabinet even as Jubilee is expected to start its purge in the National Assembly. Now ODM party is set to follow suit. The National Executive Council of ODM will meet on Thursday and major changes are expected in various positions which its members hold in the National Assembly.
Days after the ruling party began a purge against rebel parliamentarians, sources hint that the Jubilee Party leader President Uhuru Kenyatta is not taking chances, and so is new-found ally ODM leader Raila Odinga. The duo are set to start the National Assembly with unprecedented ousters of committee leaders perceived to be rebels. This comes even as ODM party is expected to have its next meeting on Thursday. Kiminin Member of Parliament, who is Minority Deputy Whip in the National Assembly, Chris Wamalwa, may lose his seat for what is deemed as party disloyalty. Others who might be axed in various positions is Aisha Juma of Malindi, Butere MP Tindimwale, Silvanus Osoro of Mugirango South, Paul Katana of Kaloleni, among others. In the looming purge, Baringo North Member of Parliament William Chiptumo might also lose his chairmanship of the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee to Rarieda Member of Parliament Otiende Amolo, while his counterpart TJ Kajwang might clinch the deputy seat, which is currently held by Kandara Member of Parliament Alice Wahome. Further, the Jubilee Party is expected to make changes in the National Assembly, where Majority Leader Edin Duale might lose his seat to Eldas Member of Parliament Aden Keinan, while Majority Whip Benjamin Washiali might be replaced by Navaholo Member of Parliament Emmanuel Wangwe. Cecily Mbarire might also be forced to relinquish her post of Deputy Majority Chief Whip to Kiambu Woman Representative Gathoni Wamshomba. This comes even as Clerk of National Assembly Michael Sialai rubbished the motion to impeach Deputy President William Ruto and says he has not received the communication as it has been circulated in the social media. Last week, Tanga allied MPs led by Gatundu South MP Moses Kuria alleged Kieni Member of Parliament Kanini Kega had a motion ready to remove Deputy President William Ruto from office.
I know Honorable Kanini Kega has a motion ready for impeachment of the Deputy President William Ruto. And I'm just wondering, and I want to ask Honorable Kanini, Ruto was fired by Uhuru Kenyatta a long time ago. Why are you firing him twice?
Elizabeth Mutuko, TV 47 Nairobi.
Elsewhere, WIPER party members are yearning for vacant positions that will be created in both the National Assembly and the Senate. Minority Whip in the Senate, Mutula Kilonzo Jr. is expected to fill the vacant position of Senate Deputy Speaker left by Kithure Kindiki, who was ousted on Friday.
An ongoing Jubilee purge that has seen politicians axed from leadership posts in the Senate, another purge is likely to create vacancies in the National Assembly. And many members, including those in Kalonzo Musyoka's WIPER Democratic Party, are eyeing the positions. WIPER is also already in coalition talks with the ruling party Jubilee, and members of the former want a deal sealed soonest. Mavoko, Member of Parliament Patrick Macau, has already hinted on the need for the party to have a share of the national cake.
Hii chama ya Jubilee ndio wenye serikali. Kuna viti za mawaziri, PS, chairmans, positions za chairmans katika National Assembly na Senate. Tunasema kama tumeingia kufanya kazi na hao, pia sisi kama wanasiasa ama wambunge wa WIPER, tungetaka pia tufaidike ndio tufanye kazi vile vile. Unajua utamu wa kazi ni malipo. Kwa hivyo hatuwezi kwenda kushikana na Jubilee ili hali hakuna vile wana WIPER watafaidika.
Representation in the National Assembly, Jubilee Party has 171 MPs, ODM 76, WIPER 23, KANU 10. Representation in the Senate, Jubilee Party has 25 senators, WIPER 3, ODM 13.
In Parliament, both at the level of the Senate and also at the level of the National Assembly. As you know, Honorable Mutula Jr. is a minority whip in the Senate, and Honorable Robert Mbui is a minority deputy leader in the National Assembly.
WIPER hopes to clinch the chairmanship of several houses committee in the National Assembly, just like Gideon Moise Kanu did in the Senate, following the removal of Kipchumba Murkomen as the majority leader. WIPER is also said to be garnering for the position of Senate Deputy Speaker, following Kithure Kindiki's ouster on Friday. Both Jubilee and ODM parties are set to streamline committee leaderships in both houses by removing members deemed to be rebels and replacing them with royal ones and those of coalition partner Aaron Kipkoech, TV 47.
All right, moving on. They were evicted from their homes in Kariobangi after their house were demolished 3 weeks ago and have been left stranded after the Deputy County Commissioner, Kasarani Sub-County, Kabune Kiamba, whom they expected to give them a way forward, failed to turn up. More than 900 families have been affected by the demolitions which were carried out by Nairobi Water and Sewerage Company. Lydia Gashomo with the details.
These are faces which portray agony, despair, and loneliness. They've been camping at this area for 3 weeks now after their homes were demolished, leaving them with no choice. This letter from the Environment and Land Court at Milimani Law Courts has ordered that these people from Kariobangi Sewerage Farmers Self-Group should not be displaced from this land, not until the hearing and determination of the matter on 2nd of June the year 2020.
Hii shamba sisi hatukunyakua. Tulianza 1996 na kutoka wakati huo wote tumekuwa na kila kitu. Tumepewa kihalali kutoka karatasi ya kwanza ni kanjo mpaka tukafikia title deed. Hivi hakuna ati unyakusi tulinyakua ama tukagrab. Hatukugrab. Sisi tumeichukua kihalali. Maana sisi zote wale wenyeji hata wale hawana document, ni vile mtu kila mtu hawezi chukua mara moja, lakini wengi wetu tunazo title deed.
For many like David Minor, the demolished houses were their main source of income. They were left penniless and without any source of income.
Kila mtu ukiwa na ploti moja unategemea umekondesha watu wane nini. Hiyo sasa ndio shamba lako, maana hakuna kazi mtu alikuwa anafanya. Anyway, kwa ukweli tumeadhiriwa.
They say the challenges they have borne in the last 3 weeks is just too much.
Kuna maji ya kuoga, hakika hata kulala ni shida. Wengi wetu ambao tulikuwa mahali hapa, wengi wanaitiwa vitu, baadaye watuletee, hakika wanapora, wanaenda kuweka mahali kwingine. Hata hizo hakika machakula, hata pesa wanapewa watuletee, tuende angalau tulipe nyumba, hakika wanaenda nazo.
Nonetheless, they still believe their help will come from their government.
Tunaomba serikali isaidie hawa walikuwa wanakaa hapa kwa hii samba. Watujulie hali, watuangalie waone vile watatufanya.
The only thing remaining for these people is hope that the government will take action and help them return to their normal lives. Lydia Gashomo, TV47, Nairobi.
All right, and as earlier promised, our first guest tonight is the government spokesperson, Colonel Cyrus Oguna, who joins us by way of phone. Now, Colonel, very good evening to you. Thank you for making time for us. Given that in the 7th National Address, President Uhuru Kenyatta hinted of reopening the country, if one is to ask, why harbor the intentions of wanting to reopen the economy and the country in a day in which the country has just reported more than 70 COVID-19 cases?
Indeed, if you listen to what the President said, it was very, very clear that looking at reopening the economy, but also caution that it depends on how we are able to comply with those measures that have been put in place to be able to help flattening our crowd. So really the opening of the economy depends a lot on how our situation develops forward. So it's not a blanket assessment that have yet gone through it. Understand? But also it must appreciate that the numbers that we're seeing are not necessarily done bad compared to earlier projections. Remember initially the projections were that by the end of April we're supposed to be seeing tens of thousands of infections. The numbers we're seeing is slightly different from that projection. So we must also say that the countries have done well, considering the numbers that we're seeing currently.
Colonel, it's 2 months since Kenya first reported its first COVID-19 case, 2 months plus some days. Kenya has tested 61,971 samples, confirmed cases, now standing at 1,186. With 52 deaths, 402 recoveries, with 29 counties having confirmed at least a case of COVID-19. One will argue the situation could be worse now that we are intending to reopen than it was when the country partially shut down.
Well, you're projecting, you're actually looking at what's going to happen tomorrow. But like I said at the beginning, that the reopening will depend on a lot of factors. Really, even the head of state will be advised by various experts. So the National Emergency Response Committee that is coordinating interventions and responses as far as combating COVID is concerned is made up of several agencies, including experts from out the government. And all of them are looking at how those situations develop and advising the appropriate action taken. And therefore, whatever decision will be made in the next coming days or weeks, we depend a lot on advisory that shall have been given by the various agencies that are looking at our development minute by minute, day by day.
All right, you make reference of the National Coordination Committee on the Response of Coronavirus Pandemic, which is chaired by the Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i. Looking at the statement of the President Father, he says, and I quote, "But if we open up the country by lifting the restrictions and the virus continues to spread, it will be our fault for not taking precautions outlined." How much of individual responsibility then trickles down to the common mwananchi, to the Kenyan?
Just a slight correction. First of all, the National Emergency Response Committee is actually chaired by the Minister of Health, Honorable Untitled. The one chairing the National Emergency Response Committee on coronavirus. But today, the committee is chaired by Interior, Dr. Matiang'i. But in terms of individual responsibility, the government has said time and time again that it is war that cannot be won by government alone. The land lies individual, and citizens. Remember, even though we have been saying that the first line of defense are the healthcare workers, but in real terms, statistically speaking, the first line of defense lies individuals themselves, ourselves. It's only when things fail us to be able to comply with and we get infected is when now we go to the next line of defense where we get healthcare workers. And therefore, it is very, very important for all of us to be able to comply with the regulations and advisories that have been issued. Because let's give an example. If a matatu is supposed to carry 8 people, and that is given, but you're the 9th person until getting into that matatu, it is you who has failed to take up individual responsibility on and on to get into that matatu. So you cannot blame the police for not being there, you cannot blame the government for not being there. It is you who has failed to take full responsibility by not entering that matatu. So everything changes on individual responsibility.
Cyrus Oguna, let me ask you this. What then informs the seemingly change of heart in as far as whether to reopen the country or not is concerned?
There is really no change of heart. You're saying that the reopening of the economy has always been on the table. But it depends a lot on how our curve is behaving, on how our curve is progressing. There is really no change of heart. You understand? And I did mention at the beginning that even the head of state was hinting on reopening of the economy. But it was also very, very quick to add that a lot will depend on how we comply with the various measures and regulations that have been put forward. So really there's no change of heart.
You say
that
there's
you
no
must
change.
continue complying with the regulations.
You say there's no change of heart, but when the president says we can't continue telling people to be at their homes, isn't that not indicative of a change of heart?
No, he was saying that we cannot stay closed forever. At some point, we must open the economy. But we must also take full responsibility and be able to, as of now, comply with advisories and advisory that we need. Because we don't want to open the economy and get to a situation whereby we have tens of thousands of infections that will suddenly overrun our healthcare system. So we must get to a point whereby we are opening the economy, but people are actually obeying and observing the various measures and regulations that we put forward to help in combating this.
And is there a specific timeline to that?
And like I say, that there is a committee that is looking at every aspect of this pandemic, from economic point of view to health issues, education issues. So NAM, which is National Emergency Response Committee, is made up of agencies from different sectors of this society. And all of them are looking at every minute of, every day to determine what impact, if infections and development every day we have in various aspects of society. And then they advise based on what they have determined that's the best way forward.
All right, with more than close to 500,000 people losing their jobs, an economy on its knees, for how long then, for someone who is watching this, for how long will they have to wait to get back to what they used to do pre-corona?
Remember, compared to various other jurisdictions, which went to complete lockdown, we never went to complete lockdown. Even as suspended international flights and even, what we can call cruise ships coming to Mombasa, a window was created to allow for cargo flights and even cargo ships to get to the country. That was actually intended to ensure that our economy is not necessarily closed down completely. Even as the, provided restriction of movement in and out of Nairobi, Kilifi, Kwale, Mombasa, and Mandera, food vehicles were allowed in to ensure that the economy continues to run. But we must agree that yes, the pandemic has impacted very, very negatively in most aspects of our economy, especially in the service industry, service sectors. And that is why the head of state 2 days ago, provided for an 8-point economic stimulus package to ensure that there is a rejig in our economy.
All right, cargo, food, transportation between some of these counties across the country could be open, but for someone who doesn't have what to buy the food with, surely they'll need at least a consideration of things getting back to normalcy, won't they?
And that's exactly what you're saying, that even today's things are right now, the government is on wisdom, found it necessary to come up with various interventions. One of them, of course, is the 1,000 shilling weekly stipend that is sent to the most vulnerable members of society. On a weekly basis. Of course, it was 2,000, but it came down to 1,000. It is also a 10 billion shillings that the government is, injected in one Jamii program, another 8 billion, another 5 billion, and then the other day the head of state did inject another 4 billion. So that in total comes about 27 billion that has been injected to help our development members of society. The government is really focused on how they are and doing everything to help them.
Colonel, just on the specifics of the amount and the budgetary allocation that the government is making, and as far as questioning Kenyans is concerned, what probability, what guarantee is there that this money will trickle down to the pockets of Kenya, to the Kenyans rather, in a country where we have seen not once, not twice, not thrice, money is meant for specific projects get into the pockets of few rather than majority?
This is a government that is for the people, that was meant by the people, and it must provide service to the people. And the head of state even yesterday, the day before, was very, very clear that every single point must get the targeted, and it will get the targeted.
But given that the backdrop of histories in as far as allocation of money is not as impressive as the government will want to make it, what guarantee is there this money will get to the pockets of people?
It certainly will, and there's every indication of the government, and I keep saying that the head of state was very clear on this, that this money, not just money alone, but even any kind of support, aid that targets the vulnerable members of society, must get the members of society or else has to go.
All right, let's talk of mass testing, what has been redefined as targeted testing. Kenya has tested so far 61,971 samples. Vis-a-vis the total population, one would argue this is a drop in the ocean. Are there intentions of doubling up the numbers?
You really saying that we initially started with, you recall, we started with two laboratories, now we are at 20. We were initially testing about 500, now we've been gone up testing about 3,000. So our testing capacity has gone up, but then of course we must appreciate that the situation that we are in currently has stabilized, our global supply chain. And a few times, what we demand or we order don't get the right quantity that we want. So indeed, our targets have been interfered by what is happening globally currently. Sometimes we order for 50,000, that is probably get 15,000. So those are the realities that we must deal with as a government. However, I must also add that when you talk about mass testing, there is no country that has been able to test every member of the society.
But there are countries that have tested thousands of their people.
Yes,
hundreds of thousands. Hundreds of thousands.
What we are doing is to identify what we call epicenters, go there, isolate that place, test those who are there. And the beauty of doing that is to ensure that the virus do not, spread to other areas of that, of that region or that location or that locale.
All right, Colonel, as we conclude the discussion, it's 2 months since Kenya reported its first COVID-19 case. From your own assessment, from the government's assessment, where would you, in a scale of 1 to 10, rate how Kenyans have obeyed or otherwise the guidelines put by the Ministry of Health?
I think largely that we have to be, of course, fair to our people. Our people have done extremely well. Now we must congratulate them, because if it were not their cooperation and the understanding, the projections that were initially put forward by the Ministry of Health would have just happened. But they have not happened because of the understanding and the cooperation that Kenyans have actually demonstrated. And therefore, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give them 7.5.
Finally, without being the proverbial African, what is the fate of the counties, inclusive of Nairobi, Mandera, Mombasa, Kwale, and Kilifi, in as far as the cessation of movement is concerned?
The advisory that was issued, or restriction that was issued, was run until the 6th of June. So I think it's important for us to wait until that. And like I did mention, the National Emergency Response Committee is reviewing all the restrictions, reviewing all these measures, and advise appropriately.
All right, Government Spokesperson Cyrus Oguna, thank you for making time for us this evening.
Thank you so much, sir.
All right, you are watching New Week. We still have another interview on floods and disaster management and preparations. And as far as the floods that are wreaking havoc across the country is concerned, we are taking a short break here on New Week. We'll be back with that discussion after this break. welcome back. Thank you for choosing to stay with us here on New Week. Now, at least 237 Kenyans have been killed by floods since the onset of the rainy season in April, with over 160,000 families being displaced in the same period. Tonight, on this part of the interview, we ask, is Kenya ever ready for a disaster? We host Venant Ndingila, who is the Disaster Preparedness and Response Manager at the Kenya Red Cross Society. Good evening, Venant. Thank you for making time for us. 237 plus people dead so far. This is arguably close to 5 times the number of people who have died of COVID-19. Is this a silent disaster?
Yeah, thank you, Abu. Yes, it is silent, but this is one of the disasters which we can predict and we can see coming, because we know the seasons in this country. We always have the long rain season, March, April, May, and the short rain season, October, November, December. The issue of deaths, yes, many people are predisposed to this flood risk in many ways because of where they stay, because of the livelihood activities which they get involved in, and therefore the risks are there in many, especially many rural areas of West Kenya and the coast province along Tana River.
So, Venant, if the weather pattern is as predictable as you say, why then is it becoming a yearly more so death pool that we must lose a certain number of people to floods year in, year out?
Yes, I'll say again, the people who find themselves at risk, there is one reason or another which makes them settle in those high-risk areas. Most of them is economic vulnerabilities, such that they don't have alternative land, or this is where they get their livelihoods in terms of small-scale farming. That's why they have to settle in those areas. Now, when the rains come, for one reason or the other, they are found in those places, and because of the daily activity, they maybe don't. But I'd like to say that, for example, the flow back of lakes like Lake Victoria, Lake Baringo, Lake Naivasha, this is some of the phenomena which are very rare. And most of the time now they catch people unawares because the water flows back into the settlements and villages.
All right, Venant, you talk of Lake Victoria, which has reached these levels since 1950s. You talk of Lake Naivasha, it last reached these levels in 1961. How much of a hand does climate change have in as far as these soaring water levels is concerned?
Yeah, there is, yes, some contribution from climate change because, for example, the season March, April, May is usually starts in the first week of March. But this time there are some of the areas west of Rift Valley and central Kenya highlands which received rains almost continuously from December, which means from the last season. They started receiving rains from late January to February, and it's very heavy rains for that matter. So the soils were already soaked since the October-November rains. So by the time this season started, the March, April, May, then already the soils were saturated. So therefore, the waters were just extra, and they were causing such havoc, which relates again to these lakes, especially Lake Victoria and Lake Naivasha and Baringo.
Fair enough, Venant. The very preamble of this discussion is the question, is Kenya ever ready for such disasters? You are the Disaster Preparedness and Response Manager at the Kenya Red Cross. In your own observation, is Kenya as a country everly prepared for such natural disasters?
What I'll say that there is an improvement every time. For example, what we are looking at here is the readiness of the people to be able to deal with this kind of disaster, because one way or the other, the rains are going to come, the land is still the same, the environment is still the same. So it is about the people being ready, having enough preparation, and for those who are to support the community, having enough preparedness. For example, the issue of early warning. the Kenya Red Cross Society, we have released, working with one of the mobile service providers, we released slightly over 24 million SMSs in the high-risk areas since early March. This was to alert people that floods are coming in your areas, try to do some coping mechanism in terms of early action to ensure you save lives and also property. This is the kind of interventions which are required, the kind of preparedness which you are talking about, which is required, because the people, the community are going to live in the same areas. There's no other alternative land. So we need to work with them so that they can be ready and they can be able to reduce the risk exposure.
Venant, you are using a futuristic little bit language. You talk of these preparations that are required. Why are they never in place before?
As I can say, yes, they have happened, and I'll bear witness that there has been some improvement because there is a lot of early warnings now. And for example, Kenya Red Cross, we had done preparation to support at least 36,000 families who were to be exposed to these floods. However, the floods this time, they became beyond what we had predicted, and as at now, we are reporting over 43,000 families who have been displaced from their homes. So the preparation and the preparedness is always there, but the magnitude of the disaster is also increasing. Also working with, or rather, looking at the human activities on the high-risk areas, so the exposure is ever increasing every time.
All right, I understand we are out of time, but two final questions. One, there are rivers in this country that are prone to breaking their banks. Talk of River Nzoia, River Tana, which has created the Tana Delta crisis. How much does this speak of those in authority then, probably not even you, but those in authority, that these are rivers known prone to overflowing, but it seems as though there's little done to make sure that the people who live there are not met by the wrath of these waters? For instance, I say that at the backdrop of what the water CS Cecily Kariuki says. She says, in Budalangi, the dikes that were there are not permanent, they're actually washed off. That sounds like a betrayal to the people of Budalangi, for instance.
Yes, so what is your question, Abu?
The question is, how much then do those in authority need to take responsibility for, in as far as these rivers that are prone to breaking their banks are not being stopped is concerned?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, again, there is some responsibility, you may say, but I'll say again, the disasters are going to come, and as you have said, the rivers and the amount of rains are still there, the environment is still the same, the community members are still the same who settle in those areas. So much as it that there is some infrastructural work which needs to be done to prevent or to reduce the risk and exposure, but still working with the community should be the answer here by the end of the day, because you need to give early warnings to the community, you need to prepare them, you need to advise them on what to do when the floods are there.
All right, Venant, my last question. We often talk of the statistics, hundreds of thousands of people, hundreds as well dead. Let's put a face value to it and a human impact to it. What do these people at this present time need?
Thank you very much. We have been responding to the needs of these people who have been impacted by this disaster. So the Kenya Red Cross teams are out there in the field doing needs assessment continuously. And so far, we have identified emergency shelter, or rather shelter for those people who have lost their homes, or also food needs, also safe and clean water, also some health support, health and hygiene, especially in this period of COVID. All COVID risk reduction support is what is also very key. And we have managed to reach at least 15,000 households with most of these needs in terms of shelter, food, We have also done some cash. So, but what we are looking at now, as the rains also continue to subside, we are looking at early recovery support, where these people need to bounce back into their lives in terms of shelter where they stay, also in terms of their livelihoods. Many, over 30,000 acres of productive land has been submerged. So these people need planting seeds. The over 20,000 livestock have been killed. They need also to, support in terms of getting back their livestock. So we are looking at, much as it is that they need emergency support in terms of health, wash, shelter, they'll need to recover back, because over 43,000 in 43 counties are having their livelihoods interrupted. This is huge. So these people need support in order to bounce back.
All right, Venant Ndingili, Disaster Preparedness and Response Manager at the Kenya Red Cross Society. Thank you for making time for us this evening as well.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I understand we are out of time. That brings us to the end of today's edition of New Week. I'm Abubakar Abdullahi. On behalf of the entire team that made this production possible, bye for now. We'll enjoy the rest of our programs.